get going.
Yep,
Tony,
good to
thanks
go.
for coming out tonight. I'm gonna let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and New York and what you're gonna be talking about tonight. Let's give Tony a round of applause for coming out tonight.
Well, my name's Anthony Sattilaro. I live in South Amboy. I've been reenacting since 1986. I started doing World War I reenacting in 1991 when a friend of mine had mentioned that they have a reenacting site in a place called Shimstown, Pennsylvania. Very nice place, very out of the way. Shimstown got me started into collecting because I saw the way these guys were, and they were fantastic. Now, as a World War I reenactor, it's completely different than when I was doing Civil War reenacting. Civil War was much more rural type of the clothing, the equipment, even the shoes. They didn't even have a right and left foot. They were called booties because your foot formed the shoe. It didn't come out, right and left didn't come out to like the middle of the war. But in World War the beginning of World War I, June 28th, 1914, Archduke Francis Ferdinand with his wife Sophia and an entourage was going through Sarajevo to a party that they were invited to. And what happened was the Archduke and his wife were assassinated by a man named Gavril Princip. Gavril Princip was part of what they called the Black Hand at the time. These were kind of these were revolutionaries. They didn't like the government, so they wanted to get rid of it. So he got lucky. Unfortunately, he started a war. When he did that, Austria-Hungary demanded Serbia turn them over to him. They said no. So Austria-Hungary went to Germany. Germany was going to make Serbia give up this guy. Germany couldn't do it. So then Russia saw that Serbia was being pushed around, and also if Russia defended Serbia, they might get a port to the Black Sea. I think it was the Black Sea. So Russia, of course, stepped in to help little Serbia. Well, then everything started going. Well, then the Germans and the Austrians were threatening the Russians, and the Russians had a pact with France and England, and everything just started getting more and more until finally we had a war. By 1915, the Germans had been doing submarine warfare on the ships, and the Lusitania was sunk. On the Lusitania were several hundred Americans, and quite a few of them lost their lives when she went down. She went down rather quickly, too. So America told Germany, don't shoot our ships. So Germany said, okay, we'll restrict submarine warfare against American ships. Well, that didn't last too long because in 1917, the Zimmermann telegram came about. It was the German author of that, Zimmermann, wrote to the Mexican government saying, look, you start a war with America. You attack Texas. You take and go after Arizona and New Mexico. We'll back you up. We'll give you the money. We'll give you the guns. You just attack America so they can't get into this. Well, there was a thing going on in America. There was a large group of people in the populace that did not want to go fight in Europe. They were against it. And even Wilson in 1916 got reelected on the slogan, he kept us out of war. So he was against going. But then again, the Germans decide they're going to start sinking American ships again. So that kind of pushed that, and the Zimmermann telegram pushed us into the war. And the British and the French really needed us though, because they were having a lot of trouble. The French were having mutinies. Regiments, whole regiments were refusing to go over the top because the Germans had a weapon over there that set up in a proper position with three more. They had what was called a triangulation of fire, and they could just sweep a field. And this machine gun was called a Browning, was called a Maxim machine gun. It was a water-cooled machine gun, and it fired a huge amount of ammunition. And the French and the British, any sane person, you've seen this thing, you're not going to go over the top. So many French units were starting to mutiny. All this and other things, I mean, the British lost, I think it was 50,000 men in one attack by the artillery, the machine gun fire that the Germans laid out on them. So when America got into it, the British and the French didn't really think that America could do it. When, in 1917, when we were chasing Pancho Villa in Mexico, the U.S. Army had about 125,000 men. It was a lot less Marines, too. When Wilson finally says, okay, we're declaring war against Germany in April of 1917, that 125,000 total, by the end of the war, was 4.7 million. Of that, 2 million American soldiers were fighting in France at that time. So as we got into this, we didn't have a lot of things like the British and French did. We didn't have helmets. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about, this is a American M17 helmet. It's a basic helmet, has an oil skin liner and a netting, and it has basic leather chin strap. You can tell that the American helmets from the British by the serial number of the ore that was used to make this helmet. It was the ore was put into the smelting machine and made the iron. Then the iron made the helmet. They made the helmet out of the iron. The Americans didn't have any helmets at the time, so we used their helmets called Brodie helmets. And the Brodie helmet had this big giant black donut, which one story I read, the Americans hated the Brodie helmet because it felt like it was just crushing their skull. They didn't know how the British could wear these things. These helmets were much easier, and they form to your head a lot quicker, especially when you're sweating going over and over. They formed, and you found that this helmet was your best friend because, I mean, you can wear the helmet like this, or you can wear it with a strap behind your head. Most men wore it behind their head because if there was ever an explosion in front of them, the helmet would be blown off and it wouldn't take the chin with it. It would be blown off. Also, these helmets were very good. The soldiers used to say they would practice throwing the helmets in the trenches, some of them would. And this was in case a German stick grenade came into the trench. They tried to chuck their helmet on it, let the helmet go flying instead of the soldier. So this is one of the main items the soldiers had.
Is that a metal that rusts?
Oh yeah, this will rust.
That will rust?
Oh yeah, I've had several of these over the years. I've had a great many of them originals that have the soldier's name and his serial number in it. This helmet was from the 79th Division. Unfortunately, someone painted over the emblem, which I feel like they're tough that person. Even though it's just a blue and gray symbol, it's still an original. Next thing the soldiers had to put up with, around 1915, 1916, the Germans started using gas, mustard gas, phosgene gas, things of that sort. Now, the French colonial troops, the Senegalese troops, they had to put up with using a napkin, a handkerchief, and for a better use of words, went to the bathroom and put it over their face to survive. For some reason, the chemical in that kept the gas from killing them. So they, of course, built on that. The French then came up with which is what's called an M2 French gas mask. Now, this gas mask is the most simplistic you can think about. The British had their hood masks, but the French had this mask. And basically, this mask just fit over your head, and your face just stuck in there, and that was it. No tucking it into your jacket or anything like that. This mask would last you a good 24 hours in a heavy gas attack. It was very common for American soldiers to have one of these hanging off when he went into combat, even though he had a box respirator, which I'll show you in a minute.
Is that leather?
The portion of it is. The front portion is leather. Yeah, and the inside is also, it would have been treated with a chemical so that the mask could be reused over and over. The mask would soak the chemical up. And that was pretty smart of the French, although some soldiers did say that the mask smelled worse than anything. Now, the British had a gas mask, And this is the hood respirator mask, as they call it. Although there is no metal box to it, they still call it a respirator. And basically, British just came up with your basic bag. Put it over your head, tuck it, unbutton your jacket, tuck it in, put your helmet back on, and hope that this would have been soaked with a chemical as well. But for some reason, the British and the French never really showed too much interest in sharing the type of, each country had to come up with their own information about these things and make the masks accordingly. Now in I think it's 1917, just before America got in, the British came up with what's called a box respirator. Now this is an American version of the box respirator. This bag, you can tell it's an American version because the buttons are called lift to dot. The British had snaps. Now the American respirator, I can get it out. The American respirator is basically this. This is a reproduction mask, and there's nothing inside the can except for us. There's nothing inside the can. It's your basic mask. You put it over your head, put your face in there, and breathe in, holding the sides as best you can, and get a good whiff from the can itself, and you know you're all set to go. A good soldier would be able to put his mask on, take the mask out, put it on, put his helmet on within 30 seconds. But you got to understand, the gas was a horrifying thing. The soldiers saw what it did. I mean, besides causing you to go blind, the gas was so lethal that men would die standing up. There was a story that French soldiers took pictures of a group of French, a group of men in a French regiment that had died. One man was actually standing up, leaning against the wall with his hands to his neck, and he died like that, leaning against the wall. It was just horrendous. That's why they think when Hitler was in World War I, he was gassed. Not horribly, but he was gassed. And they think the reason why he did not launch that type of attack against the Russians and the Americans and the French and the British and everybody else that was going after him was because he remembered what he went through. And that really, because if he had started using that stuff, the Russians would have just went ballistic. They would have just been dropping it all over the place. And there would have been a lot more casualties, both friend and foe. That's just my opinion. In the beginning of the war, soldiers wore Montana peak caps. The Montana peak cap came from the Spanish-American War. In this, when someone enlisted in the Spanish-American War, they were given their full uniform. Their hat was just a basic blank hat. They were told, mold it any way you want. So you had hats that looked like Montana peaks. You had hats that looked like fedoras. You had all different styles. The U.S. Army, though, did like the Montana peak. It was a very popular hat back then. So they started issuing hats. Now, before World War I, this was the main fatigue hat that a soldier would wear. It's a very nice hat. Unfortunately, it's too small for me. It's a very nice hat. The other hat is, of course, the peak cap for a enlisted man. You can tell because of the circle emblem on the front. If it was an officer, it'd be a American Eagle badge and all that on there. And this one, amazingly, fits. A lot of stuff I found. Everybody was very small people back then. Different diet. As a medic, I portray a medic when I used to reenact the different events. Medical belt, excuse me. You can see are these very large pockets. If it was an infantry man's ammo pouch, the pouches would be a lot smaller. They're only 10 of them. These are, there's 10 here, but these are a lot bigger. And the reason why is because they're supposed to hold either one bandage, one metal bandage, Or they also made them, by 1917, they were making them out of paper bandages. Cotton bandage, but wrapped in paper. They found that the metal rusted too easily, and sometimes was not, they were not able to open it when they had a wounded man there. But the medic had of course, his canteen. He would have his own medical bandage as well. I don't have the pouch for it, but he would have one hanging off there as well. It was always told to the medics, you come across a man who's wounded, use his bandage. Save whatever you got on your belt or in a bag or something, in case you run into a whole bunch of people. Use his stuff. Also, in one of these pouches would be a little bottle of alcohol, just a tiny thing like that, one of the pouches, and they would use that in case it was a really nasty one. They put alcohol on it, then wrap it up and get the guy back as quick as possible. Any questions so far?
Did everybody have a belt or just a medic? Like that?
These were just medic belts. If it was an infantryman's belt, it would be completely different. He'd have a bayonet hanging off, and he would have his canteen in his medical pouch. If he was a machine gunner, he'd also have a pistol on his belt. But as a medic, I would be wearing this. I would have a musette bag, which would have more medical items such as bandages and tools and whatever. But as a medic, I was not allowed to do major things. I was not allowed to work on a soldier in the field. My duty was to bandage him up and get him back. If I was in World War I, that would be it. Get him stabilized and crawl back with him. Back in 1996, I was with a group of people at Gettysburg at the Eisenhower Farm, and we were given the honor of having 6 World War I veterans from the local VA hospital. They were brought out to us, and there was one very tall man. He was 107 years old, and he had to be 6'7", huge, very tall man. And he was very, very skinny, but he was, standing upright like he was like in his 70s. He was a beautiful guy. And so he was in the 112th Infantry Regiment of the 20th Division, Pennsylvania's National Guard Division. He used to say, when he was in the war, he got wounded. They sent him back to the field hospital, and they sent him back to a regular hospital that was like 5 miles behind the lines. He got well enough, but they said, you can't go back into the fighting. You're too tall. The trenches are 6 feet deep, and he's 6'7". So they used to joke around and dig a little bit deeper for him to stand in. So they wouldn't let him go back into the trench. So they said, we're going to put you with the motor transport company. You're going to be driving trucks. And one of the trucks he drove was a Liberty truck. Henry Ford built Liberty trucks for the U.S. Army, and he charged $1 per truck so that the U.S. Army would have as much vehicles as possible. So here he is, this guy. He's told he's not allowed to go back up to the front to fight with his buddies. So they put him in, they teach him how to drive a truck, because a lot of people did not drive vehicles at that time. It's still a new item. So they taught him how to drive one of these Liberty trucks, and he was driving ammunition trucks, and he was driving food trucks and everything. Whatever they put in the back of the truck, he drove it to where he had to go. So this gentleman is walking around, he's looking in our tents. Us reenactors, we're like falling over ourselves, wanting to make sure he's having a good day. And he's looking at all this stuff, and he's, oh, I remember I used to have that. Oh yeah, I did that. And it was fantastic. Here's a man, he's reliving his youth, and he's looking at all this stuff, and we're just happy as anything. Well, one of the displays there was a Liberty truck. There was a guy who spent almost $80,000 to put this thing back together, and it was like pristine. Every single piece, even every screw, was absolutely to what the truck had to have. Well, he went to lunch. The guy who owned the truck went to lunch. This old guy, he gets to the truck, and he was joking around with the guy, just help me get it started. I want to feel it revving. The guy didn't know, he got it started, put it in gear and drove off. And this old guy just tooling around in Gettysburg. He's driving past the monuments, he's waving at people, and he's just chugging along. And the guy comes back from lunch. Now, he's been gone for a good 45 minutes, and we're like, where'd he go? So the man, of course, is freaking out. He calls the cops. So, he said, he thought, one of the reenactors took it. He was gonna have somebody's head. Well, they found him on the other side of Gettysburg, heading out of town. So they got him to turn around, go back, and he we could, where we were on Eisenhower Farm, looking down, we could see him driving along. There's 2 cop cars in front of him, 2 behind him, and they said, "You follow the cars up." So he drove the truck up, down the road. We went through the little area there where the fence was, came up, drove it up, parked it right in front of the guy. The guy's like, you can see he's just falling over himself, ready to yell at them. And the old guy climbs out of the truck. He goes, "It's nice, but it's not like the one I had." And he walked away from me. He walked away. And the guy was just like, "Oh, pulling his hair out." What are you going to do? The man's 100-something years old. And that in that 1996 meeting, we also met a guy who was in the U.S. Navy. He was 15. He lied about his age. He got on and he got accepted into the U.S. Navy. World War I. So of course they put him on a ship. I think he was on a destroyer or a cruiser, and nobody knew he was 15 years old. One of the guys on the ship said, "Well, when's your birthday?" He was going up to tell the guy. So the guy had to go report him to the chief petty officer, who went to the boom, right up the line. The captain of the ship says, "Well, you're 16 years old now," because he celebrated his birthday on the ship. "You're 16 years old now. I'm going to put you at the next port. I don't care." Well, somebody spoke up for the kid, said, "Look, just use him as the cabin boy." From that point on, he stayed in the Navy for the full time they wouldn't let him, until I think right before World War II. And then they told him, "Well, it's been, 28 years, you're done." So, but I think he re-enlisted for Korea, but I'm not sure about that. But you couldn't take it out of him.
Wasn't Walt Disney the ambulance driver in World War I?
I think he was,
remember they
yes.
had pictures with him in the
Yes,
same
yes.
year.
Yeah, I think he was. Yeah.
So
Like Ernest Hemingway was an ambulance driver in Italy.
a lot of
Yeah.
famous people.
Oh yeah. Well, anybody have any questions?
Not yet.
No, not yet. Okay. The soldiers had to make do with what they had, what they could get a hold of during their time in the trenches. A lot of soldiers spent weeks, maybe even a month or so in the trench in active duty, and some soldiers got up there for a week, and then their unit was pulled out. So it was, as one soldier put it, it was 90% boredom and 10% sheer terror, because you can hear the artillery in the distance, but as you got through it, your time being out there, you could tell which way the artillery was going by the low report of the artillery going off. If it's a very dull thud like that, you can tell they're firing in a different direction. Or if the guns are going to be firing at you, it's more of a louder like they're pointing right at you. The soldiers would talk about the way the ground would vibrate, and it felt like it was actually like you were on the water as the artillery rounds were coming down, because the Germans were using very large caliber artillery pieces. And these things were big enough to knock out a bunker 60 feet below, 40 feet or 30 feet below the earth. With one hit, could collapse the whole thing. The Germans had cement bunkers. So no matter how many times they were hit with artillery rounds, nothing happened. These things are so elaborate, they would have pianos down there. The officers would have these luxury rooms with electrical lights running through it and all that. But the one thing that really got to the Germans was food. Germany and Austria-Hungary were boxed in. Food supplies in Germany were running low by 1917. The soldiers were, they weren't looking for information when they captured like a French soldier. They were looking to see if he had bread in his bread bag. They needed food, whatever they could get. The Americans would come up with very weird meals, trench pudding. Trench pudding was made of the grease from canned Spam, corned beef, canned, but which was called corn willy because of the mule, because it tasted like mule meat. It was very disgusting back then. So you took the grease from the corn, the corned beef, and then you mixed it with jelly, if you were able to get it from a British soldier, and you put it on top of the trench, and you let dirt fly in it and all that stuff, and it was a very disgusting thing, but the soldiers had whatever they could get their hands on. They oh, smoking. Of course, it was a big thing back then. Smoking was like a given. If you can't find food, you get cigarettes. These are two original packs from a World War II kit, but it's still basically the same kind of design. This is Camels, and this is Chesterfield. So I kept them anyway. Even though they're not World War I, I still kept them. Soldiers had a smoke. If they were lucky, they smoked a pipe. They get pipe tobacco, but mostly it was cigarettes. They also came up with ingenious ways of doing things. They made what these called or match safes. They take the emblem off an insignia from a uniform. This one is this is from a French uniform. They would attach it to a piece of brass, and they would put their matches in it. This is one of the original items. And then they will also have these are called windproofs. Just a lighter, like anything else. The little cap, as you can see, there's a little cap, and that would protect the flame. That would put out the flame. That would snuff out the flame. Soldiers always knew that you can only get one light per match, because the German snipers would be able to zoom in. If you held the match too long for someone else, someone was going to get shot at.
Well, how about the smell of the smoke? Wasn't that just bad?
Well, usually what they would do is they would blow it down, try to get it to stay as low as possible so it doesn't fill up. No Man's Land was a very horrifying thing, in fact, with the gas. A lot of times the gas would settle into the lower portions of the shell craters. So soldiers are always taught from very moment they step in, don't go in the shell craters. If you do, don't go all the way to the bottom, because there's always some kind of gas floating around there. If it's not there anymore, it's soaked it's in the water. So you could get sick that way too. They'd wind up getting blind, or they would wind up with shakes. There's videos out about the soldiers with shell shock. You see them shaking all the time. The mental stress of being in that type of situation was just unbearable for some men. And really, I think all the men, if they had to go even one night being in the trenches and hearing that artillery bang, 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 you don't know when it's coming down on. The fear must be. I've never been in the service. I've read so much about this stuff. I don't have any way of honoring veterans, whether they're from modern day or from Vietnam or, well, Korea, even the men from World War II. I have no way to honor them, but try to understand something of what they lived through in their youth. I don't want to insult anybody. And so, I mean, when I met the guys in '96, it was just beyond belief. One more story. In the 75th anniversary of World War I, World War I veterans at the VA in Philadelphia were getting medals for in honor of the 75th anniversary. And these 5 men, they're in their wheelchairs, and they were saluted by the French consulate guard that was there. They were saluted and all that. They received their medals and they were taken back. My friend Bill and I were standing there, and we had come there for the ceremony. We looked over behind us. There was a very tall black man. He was standing there, and he was just, like he was trying to stand at attention. So I said, Bill, you don't think? He said, oh, why don't you go ask him? So I went there and asked him, and yeah, he was part of the Harlem Hell Party.
Wow.
He was part of that. And I said, well, I'm gonna ask you a question. I'm a reenactor. He goes, what's that? I said, that's someone who reenacts history. Oh, okay. So I said to him, I had all my gear on, everything, the helmet down, the boots, everything. I said, am I doing this right? You know about it. Am I doing this right? And he's looking at me and looking at me. He goes, why is your canteen on your butt? Your butt doesn't need the water. You need the water. Put your canteen up there. Turn around and walked away. No, all the time, all the money I spent on things like this back then, and the only thing I got wrong was that the canteen was back there. He was a beautiful person, beautiful person. Very much.
Your clothes that you're wearing,
Yes.
are they wool?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I bought these from Great War Military back in, I want to say 2007, 2008. I had other uniforms as well from them, but this seemed to be the only one that really held up. And here it is, 22, and I'm still able to wear it. Although it has some repairs here and there.
But is that the basic?
What?
That would have been the basic.
Oh, that would have been
Or
basic.
what other parts do you have besides?
Well, the overcoat's at home.
Okay.
Because believe it or not, this thing is okay for this 30-degree weather. I don't need an overcoat. I'm hot enough. The hat, although, some people, if you see like the movie, like The Fight in '69 for James Cagney, they're always wearing their tilted to the right. No. U.S. military order is you have to keep your hat aligned as best you can to your, you're not allowed to tilt it. There's no jauntiness of it. You keep your hat the way it is. And a lot of soldiers, of course, when nobody's looking at tilt it. Okay.
Firepower,
Oh,
bring anything interesting?
no, I portray a medic. I don't have anything like that. I mean, I like those guys, my friends. They had fun doing that stuff.
What's that? What is that?
Do you have a canteen?
Oh, this? Oh, yeah, the canteens are right here.
And then what's the thing called when you eat out of it?
Mess kit.
We'll pass that around. The mess kit's over here. This mess kit is the,
Like the Boy Scout.
Yeah.
they have it,
actually,
right?
after World War I, US government wanted to get rid of as much of the stuff as possible, so they put it out for anybody to get, and Boy Scouts got the stuff for free.
I remember
They got
that.
mess kits, they got hats,
And
they got everything. Like in that movie, the Indiana Jones, they showed him as a kid.
when he
He's
jumped, he's
wearing
wearing.
a Boy Scout uniform, but he would be wearing a World War I Montana cape. This is, as you can tell, this thing's been cleaned up.
Mhm.
They usually had knife, fork, and.
My
And
fork
what
is-
else is there?
Unfortunately, I will say this, can't find my fork and spoon. I only found my knife, so yeah, that's a lot.
But was there other things besides the cutlery?
No, that would be it.
That was basically.
Basic, the way the soldiers would have it, they would have the lid hooked onto the arm, and they would hold it like this, so they would get, like, let's say stew in the deep section, and they would have their bread or something on the pan section. Some soldiers would cook in their pans, but the problem is that's tin. It gets too hot, you're eating tin. It gets all over the food, you can't eat. So most of the soldiers are always told, don't ever cook in the pot, it's in the pan itself. Oh, I have a small collection of items that over the years. In the frame, I have private first class, that's for the Air Corps, the airplanes. Of course, the infantry corporal and infantry sergeant, the 78th Division, the Lightning Division. That would be the shoulder patches go over here. And we have you'd have the wound and the service stripes, which with the service stripes, I want to say are on the left sleeve, and the wound stripe would be, I think, on the right sleeve, but I might be wrong on that. I'm sorry if I am. This is the officer's insignia for the hat. the officer insignia for the hat. And Marine Corps insignia, that would be for the 1895 belt hat, which is, it looked like a kepi. It was higher, but it sloped inwards on all sides and around to the bottom of the head. Thank you. And then, of course, you have some rank bars. Yeah, a second lieutenant bar, which is the gold bar. The gold. You have the corporal, the captain's bars, which are there. And then you have a major and a lieutenant colonel insignia. I don't have the general stars, unfortunately. Of course, an original watch and the collar discs. Now, the collar discs were invented so the soldiers wouldn't have to have numbers on their helmets or anything like that to cross rifles, cross cannons, or whatever. So the collar discs were invented. I think it was, yeah, it was before World War I. There are certain things. I have a Coast Guard, coastal artillery collar disc for like at Fort Mott, they would have the coast artillery. I have the coast artillery. I have that there. This is INT for intelligence. That's for headquarters or hospital. This one's for the tank corps. And then you have one more, which is the 333rd Infantry Regiment. The reason why I bought that one is because my son was born on 3303, so it's good. And when he wants it, he'll buy it.
Tony, is that something new, a wristwatch for that time period?
Yeah, it was. Watches were up to a certain point, all pocket watches. But it was very difficult when you're in combat situation to be able to take a pocket watch out of your shirt pocket or pull out of your pants, your watch fob pocket. So what they did was, I don't know who invented it, but they took a regular pocket watch and I guess they welded or they soldered or whatever, two loops on either side and hooked it up with a band. And it became very popular during the war that you would have that. Now that watch, and it's in there, used to work. What?
OVA.
Okay, thank you. That watch in there used to work 20 years ago. Unfortunately, age got to it and the hands fell off. I mean, I didn't bang it or anything. I just, put it away. Well, not in there. I put it away, and when I came back to look at it, both hands were sitting on the bottom by the six. So there goes that. So now it's a showpiece, but it's still a nice one.
What's that metal? What is that metal object?
Which one?
The big one sitting in the back there.
This?
Siren.
That's a siren.
Let it rip.
I don't know. Well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good enough.
Everyone is awake.
Can we keep that? Can we keep that here?
Oh, you can have that. Hey, mine. Who brought it in?
I did.
That's his.
Oh, that's yours?
That's his.
Yeah, that's World War I,
Chemical warfare.
chemical
siren.
warfare siren, so
Or just-
it made that sound, so you put your mask on, and so
Mhm.
you knew they were,
They also had the clacker. It was a wooden,
yeah.
it was like, well, they had the metal triangle, ding, 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 like that. And then they had the one where you spun it like a New Year's Eve party favor. You spun it on it, it clacked, but it was usually a big piece of wood like this with a little wheel on it, and it was loud enough. Everybody, as soon as they heard that, they threw the helmet off, put the mask on, put the helmet back on as quickly as they could, because they didn't want to get caught without it.
Bill, is that a family piece you have, or how do you?
No, I found that at an auction. Actually, I want you to keep that in your collection. I think it should stay with that.
Oh, no.
I don't have
I
any,
couldn't do that.
No, please.
It's
works
been
with the
sitting in a
masks.
closet in our house, and as nice as it is, you could
You're
probably
actually
get far more
Yeah,
use out of it.
definitely use that.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate that. That's very nice. I wasn't expecting that.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
and you have a place to use it.
Well, I appreciate it. That's very nice. of you. That's very nice. of you. Thank you very much. Beautiful gift. Yeah, I told you that.
We'll definitely raise some people up with it.
We got new neighbors that night. And they start parking in front of the house.
That's really
Yeah.
loud.
They'll be calling the cops.
World War I, you were still allowed to pay someone to take your spot?
I think so, but it was more for like, Civil War.
Yeah,
I
right,
did
but it
that.
was still in World War I.
I think you could get away with it, but it wasn't as easy like when in the Civil War.
My cousin.
In the Civil War, it was very easy. In World War I, yeah, it probably was a little bit more difficult, but if you had the money to be able to get people to do it, then
400.
Yeah.
I came across the record. Wow.
Yeah.
that's pretty awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That was a year's salary at the time.
Yeah, even that, they would, less than $1 a day
I
sometimes.
was surprised. Yeah, they still do it.
What clothes were you issued besides what we see you're wearing?
Well, the soldier would receive, a pair of, long underwear, which was called a union suit. Or they would be, issued, bottoms and tops, depending on the unit and the supplies they had. A lot of the clothing they got actually was stuff left over from, 20, 30, 40 years ago, before World War I. So they got that stuff first, but then there would be issued a bottom and top. They would be issued white undershirts and regular wool shirt, the 3-button for a enlisted man, and a full-length shirt button for an officer. Usually officers bought their own clothes because they didn't want to wear what the Army issued them. But officers found during the war that to be inconspicuous in the war, they realized the snipers are looking for that silver bars. The snipers are looking for any little doodad that you got to show that you're an officer, and you would be picked out. So like MacArthur, no, not MacArthur, the OSS, I forget his name now. Oh, man.
Pershing?
No, not Pershing. No, the guy who was started the OSS, was in charge of the OSS in World War II. Wild Bill Donovan. I think that's who it was. I think it was Wild Bill Donovan who dressed as a private soldier. Nothing showed him being an officer, but his men knew he was an officer. So, and a lot of trench raids were handled by one officer and 4 men, and they stripped themselves down to just their uniform, a belt with maybe a pistol and a trench mallet, which was basically a club with nails in it. They would have trench knives, they would have all these different weapons, and they'd go over the top to 5 when the officer would be in charge. But he looked just like that. And you could tell he was an officer because he had the whistle. A whistle. Why would you need a whistle in no man's land? I don't know, but yeah. And they would go over the top. But a lot of soldiers, back to your question, was they had like I said, they had that stuff, and they would have the wool tunic and the breeches. Now, another funny thing is, in 1917, the U.S. Army uniform was a very meticulously made uniform. It was made out of panels. And there was like 2 panels, and the back was a panel, and the front was a panel, and the pockets were all, the pockets were panels. They were added onto the material. In 1918, they had to do something because material was getting tight. They had to make more uniforms, but they didn't have enough material. So what they did was they decided to cut the 17 specs to the bare minimum. This is a 1918 version of uniform. You can see I don't have patch pockets. The pockets are on the inside of the jacket. Okay, I still have the pocket flaps. The paneled jacket is not like panel like that anymore. It's just a basic front and it's sewn on the basic back. They saved so much that they were actually able to add more uniforms to be issued out during the war because of that. The pants, the breeches, they also found if they made the breeches into straight legs, they saved material then too, because you didn't have this extra flare. You didn't have this extra flare, all this extra material, sooner or later, you're going to be able to put more pants together, and they made straight legs. Now, the British had been wearing straight legs for a long time, and they said, no problem. It was the British fault that we got stuck with these things, though. The leg wraps, British fault, because they said the French and British were wearing leg wraps for the war. We come in and we got leggings. We have canvas leggings, well, canvas rips, barbed wire. So the British and French said, you should do leggings. The soldiers will get used to it. No soldier liked these things. They didn't like the leg wraps. The leg wraps were a horrible thing because when they're standing in water, up to your knees, up to your waist, your feet soak up all that and you get trench foot. They didn't want to take the leg wraps off to get their boots off to dry their feet because the leg wrap was such a hard thing to have to deal with. So they'd be in the water for as long as they had to, and then when they were taken out, as soon as they took the leg wraps off, their legs were swelled up like crazy. Took the boot off. Some men had to have the boots cut off because their feet swelled so bad they couldn't pull the boots off. It was all because of the leg wraps. If they had the leggings, it would have been a lot easier to just, unlace them real quick, pull them off. These things you gotta unroll. You're talking 11 feet worth of material on each leg.
Oh, my goodness.
6 feet of wool and 5 feet of tape that wraps around the top. Annoying. Some soldiers were lucky, they were able to get, some soldiers were lucky, they were able to get hip waders. Because they like soldiers closer to the Belgium section of fighting, I think they were the 33rd Infantry Division. They were fighting alongside the British. They were actually issued British weapons and ammunition. They were wearing this because it was easier to supply them, yeah. And so I think they were closer. They had hip waders because in Belgium, it's too wet. It's too much water, too much. It's a soggy state. It's a country. I mean. A soggy place. So they would have hip waders, things like that. And so raincoats. A lot of the men had ponchos. Ponchos were good, but they flare out sometimes, especially if you put the poncho on and then put your gear on, you still had the bottom flaring out on you. Now, it might keep you dry up here, but the water would, of course, get into the hole. In World War II, they fixed it. They made the hole tighter, so not that much water came in. I think in Vietnam, it was the ponchos were even more secure. You didn't get wet that often. But I'm not sure about that. But the ponchos were good, but they flare out, so they would rip these. The poncho is made of canvas, so they would rip. So they had also the raincoats, which were very good. The officers mainly had raincoats, but some soldiers later on, towards the end of the war, they were getting raincoats as well. They were getting items from home, like scarves. Mom or sis or somebody would knit them up something, and they would knit it for I think it's 5 or 6 feet, and this way it can wrap around your neck, wrap around your head. You can put your tin derby on top, and your ears would be a little bit better. They also, the British Red Cross would knit balaclavas. Balaclavas. I can't pronounce that. This is an original British one that I've had for many years, and it's you can see the use of it. It's kind of beat up, but I tell you what, in all the years of reenacting, whenever it was cold, I put this thing on. I wasn't that cold anymore. My head was nice and toasty under this thing. Unfortunately, when it got wet, that's a different story. But other things, they would knit socks and stuff. But a lot of times during the war, of course, soldiers' packages sent from home sometimes would have to pass through certain areas, postal areas, and this, oh, hey, something's shaky, and I think something broken. They rip it open, they steal the scarves or this and that, and then they take the box up or tie the box up and ship it out. So instead of the guy getting a nice scarf, a good pair of gloves that his sister knitted for him, some food, some extra this, so actually he gets maybe one glove and maybe a can of peaches or something nobody wanted or something like that. So of course it happens in every war. You send a package to a soldier, you're lucky if that guy gets it. So, and it wasn't just the men in the military. The women in that time period showed that they could do things too. They weren't just nurses. Nurses was a fantastic job and they did a great thing. But there was also a group of women called the Hello Girls. Now these women were part of the communication service in Paris. And I think it was Paris. And they were in charge of making sure all the calls went. I think they spoke French, they were Americans, and they were so needed for the time period Because, I mean, these ladies did a job that they probably would have had the guys do. So, I mean, it was just fantastic. Hello, girls. Look up that information. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. It really is. The nurses in World War I, the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, the YMCA, they were called the donut dollars. A lot of them were called donut dollars because they learned to make donuts in the most rural type of way. I mean, a perfect example. The story goes, there was a group of ladies, donut dollars. They were given an area about 3 miles behind the line to set up their tables and have coffee or whatever for the soldiers as the soldiers are passing, going up to the line or coming back. Comfort food, something to make them feel somewhat at ease, even though they might be going towards the fight or coming home, coming back from the fight. But they weren't given any cooking equipment. They weren't given stoves or ovens or nothing. They were told, you got to make do with a campfire. Well, there was one lady in the group who they wanted to cook over a campfire. So the area they were in was high in clay. She found an old barrel. She put the barrel in one spot and she dug up all this clay and she smeared it over the top. And she lit the barrel on fire once it was covered in clay. Now, I mean, talk about like 2 to 3 inches of clay on top. She burned the barrel. Well, the barrel burning dried the clay. The bands of the barrel were still there. That's what provided support. She made donuts by making up, put it on the pan and putting it into the fire, the embers and coals, and she baked the donuts in the oven. And I don't know how they kept the heat from coming out the hole, but somebody asked her, how'd you learn that? She said, well, my father was a sergeant when I was younger, and he had to do things like this when he was out west. She did that. And, you know, they did anything they could to make sure the soldiers were comfortable, because they knew from what they heard, the stories they heard, what the soldiers were going through. Okay. I know I'm on camera, so I hope I'm not messing up.
Oh, that's you do your job.
So I have a question.
Yes,
I remember years ago, we refer to it as World War I now.
Yeah.
But when did that start being used, World War I? I remember older people years ago, they never called it World War I, they called it the Great War.
or the war to end all wars.
War to end all wars, and if you go to some of the cemeteries and see the monuments, it says Great War.
Right.
Or whatever it is. So when World War I become popular, because you early on, you've been doing this for a long time. So I guess it's the
I'm
80s. So
I'm gonna put my reputation on the line here, and I'll say probably when World War II was really
They knew about it.
really getting,
Yeah.
when we first got bombed in 1941 by the Japanese, and everybody said, oh, well, let's go fight the Japs, and then okay, the Germans declared war on us, and then we declared war on them, and then everything just started building up again, and somebody just probably came up with, oh, now it's World War II.
okay.
That was 1, this is 2. And hopefully we don't have a 3.
That started yesterday.
Yeah.
Got something stirring.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember.
We know it.
Okay.
And how long have you been reenacting?
There's the original. It took me all this time to realize it's done.
Did the hats go under your?
Well, some people did, but I usually saw when the soldiers wearing belts, usually put there, or he left his hat on unless he was in the presence of an officer, well, not an officer, he saluted the officer, but he would, if he was in the presence of a lady, he would, of course, take his hat off.
Very good.
Very good.
Very good.
Thank you very much. And that concludes our meeting. Tony, thank you very much. That was very informative.
Very good.
Definitely learned some new things there.
I
And I hope you
appreciate
can come
it.
back